All right. Welcome back. This is episode 17 of the Feel for the Game podcast. We're going to go ahead and get started with our week 11 recap. We had a solid slate that did not disappoint like a lot of people thought would this week. Had a couple of upsets, had some really interesting stuff happen with the group of five. We're going to go ahead and get started with the group of five as our first game. Memphis taking on Tulane at Tulane. Final score 38-32. Did not expect this one to happen. I thought that Memphis was going to go and take care of business here. I believed in Brendan Lewis, and he actually played a pretty solid game, but Memphis could not protect the quarterback in this game.
No, and this just kind of began a theme for this week of just carnage all around college football. This was the first game that kind of did that. I mean, Memphis was leading for the G5 playoff spot, and now that's erased. Tulane had a great chance before last week, and then they lost. They got blown out by UTSA. So all these teams just taking each other down. Retzlaff looked really good, dominated this game. He pretty much was the main player that got them this win.
Yeah, he had 375 total yards and four touchdowns, most of that coming through the air, which we haven't seen from him all season. He played really solid. One of the biggest plays in the game was they opened up with a 65-yard touchdown to Shaz Preston, took the top off the defense, set the tone, made it pretty clear that Memphis was going to have to find a way to pressure the quarterback if they wanted to win, and the opposite ended up happening. Tulane ended up sacking Brendan Lewis six times in this game with a total of 10 tackles for loss. They lived in the backfield. I didn't see that coming. From watching Tulane this year, they have not looked like a team that's gotten good pressure on the quarterback, but they did in this game. So I was really impressed by what Tulane was able to do. Unfortunately, they've already got two losses. Only one conference loss, which came to UTSA just a couple weeks ago, and then they had the road loss to Ole Miss in a blowout. This team will probably have a chance outside at the AAC Conference Championship game. I believe that USF is still the best group of five team, even though they also have one conference loss and one non-con loss to Miami. They profile pretty similarly, but I feel like USF's just got a way better ground game at quarterback. So may see them square off in the AAC Conference Championship game here in a couple weeks. I'm looking forward to that one. I really want to see Byron Brown give this team a shot at the playoffs. But overall, it ended up being exciting towards the end. Memphis tried to pull back into this one and give themselves a chance to win. They fall up short in this one. Tulane gets the win, sets the pace for carnage this week, which we'll keep talking about as we move on with these recaps. But this is kind of what started everything. All right, the next game we've got Texas A&M goes to Missouri and pulls off a 38-17 convincing win. I finally got a score right, Landon. This is the first accurate prediction I've had on score and outcome all season. I had Texas A&M winning this game 38-17, and that is exactly what happened, which doesn't really often end up being the case when we predict these games. So, got to give myself some props for that. I felt like Texas A&M kind of did what they wanted to do in this one. Marcel Reed didn't really have to do too much, which is probably what they were hoping would be the case. When he has to do too much, sometimes he makes some poor decisions, and that puts them in a bind. But this team is just so solid with so many different playmakers that if he just plays his part and uses his athletic ability when it's time to and not forcing things, they're so hard to stop. Nobody's really done a good job of stopping them all season, maybe other than Auburn. Auburn's the only team that's really slowed them down. They still couldn't beat them. So Marcel Reed finishes 20 for 29, 221 and two touchdowns. Not a crazy stat line, but pretty solid. I was impressed with how he played. He was very poised, and the pass rush really didn't get to him in this one. Um, if anything, A&M's pass rush had some key plays, getting a strip sack. Damian Sanford in the second quarter strip sacks Matt Zollers and puts them in a position to take a two-score lead before the half. I think pretty much after that, A&M had this one in the bag. It was never really in doubt.
Yeah, I mean, with just how one-dimensional Missouri's offense was, I mean, they ran the ball okay, but they had zero passing game. Zollers was 7 for 22. You're not going to win games in the SEC with stat lines like that, especially against a top three team like A&M. And they really didn't have to do anything extra special on offense. I mean, with how good their defense was able to just shut down Missouri, it was just business as usual.
Yeah, I think the recipe in this one for A&M was just continue to get the ball to your playmakers. They've got some of the best in the country with KC Concepcion, and they've also got Mario Craver. And Ruben Owens is coming on as the lead back now that we saw Le'Veon Moss get hurt earlier in the season, which was unfortunate. But I mean, they've just been so dynamic. They get the ball to their playmakers and they don't force stuff with Marcel Reed. I mean, they can beat anybody. offensively. And that's exactly what they did. Our keys for Missouri to have a chance in this game was to get the stretch run going and play action off of that. They did not get the passing game going. They had some success running the ball, which I figured would be the case. Ahmad Hardy and Jamal Roberts both go for over 100 yards. They still fail to score more than 17 in this one. They had their chances. I think they missed some field goals, had a couple opportunities to score and did not. Had some turnovers like the fumble we just mentioned. At the end of the day, like you said, Zollers being a freshman and going 7 for 22 with 77 passing yards against the number 3 team in the country is just absolutely not going to cut it. This team is just a couple of players away from probably competing pretty closely with A&M, but not having Bo Pribula in this one really hurt them. They have two really solid wide receivers. To not be able to get them the ball is just you don't have a chance at that point. So I was impressed with what I saw from A&M. This is their first really convincing win for me, other than the LSU game in a little while. So good to see them put this team away when they should have. They're setting up for probably one of the best seasons in program history right now, with a really solid shot to go into Austin and finish on a huge note and go 12-0. That's pretty wishful thinking considering what we usually see from A&M, but I think Mike Elko's changed the trajectory of this football program. We might see something that's never been done there this season.
Yeah, it's seeming like the Jimbo 8-4 is being washed away.
Yeah, I think Kevin Sumlin and Jimbo Fisher
Yeah,
have
Kevin Sumlin too. Yeah.
taken all that bad juju with them to other places, and I think neither of them are currently employed. So that tells you a lot. I'm really impressed with what Mike Elko's doing there. It's really incredible. So that was a great game. I enjoyed it. I wish we had gotten to watch a little bit more of it. We were at the Mississippi State Georgia game during when most of this was being played early in the first half when it was still close. So we didn't get to watch too much of it, but after watching a couple of the key plays, I thought it was pretty clear who had the best players individually, which was what we talked about in the preview. I just feel like A&M's got some of the more talented individual players in the country. And even when they don't have the most holistically sound team on certain days, their mid performance or below average performance is enough to beat really good teams like this. So, very impressive win for Texas A&M. Alabama takes on LSU at home and dominantly wins 20-9 in a low offensive output game. LSU, I really don't think ever had a chance in this game. It looked close early in the first half, but their offense was never going to give them a chance in this one.
You're not going to go into Bryant Denny and not score a touchdown and win a game.
Yeah, I think they may have had one game. I don't remember if it was in Tiger Stadium, but it was like a 9-6
The
game.
9-6. I think that there was no touchdowns in that game. I think that
Yeah,
was at Packer Stadium. And
it
then
probably
Bama got
was.
revenge on them in the Natty that year,
Yeah,
21-0.
this matchup, like you rarely see that happen, and when it does happen, it's because of two really elite defenses, and not necessarily maybe one offense being really poor. I felt like LSU's offense in this game was just unbelievably poor. They continued to do the same things they always do. I mean, they had a couple good runs with Harlan Berry, which I was hoping they would lean on that just to show me that they could be a different team for once, but they didn't. They stopped giving them the ball and they started to try and throw these check downs and these short stop routes and drag routes, all the typical stuff that LSU's been doing all season, these screens, and they just got bottled up. And Garrett Nussmeier was only averaging like 5 yards per attempt. He was 18 for 21, but he could not move the ball down the field, so they bench him. MVS goes in, or MVB, sorry, and he plays just really inconsistently. Like he shows flashes of being a really great runner, and then the offensive line can't protect him, so
Yeah, I
he
mean, it looked
panics.
like they're about to do something, and then the offensive line would fold, and he would get sacked, and then they had a strip sack at the end of the game. Just anytime they'd take a step forward, they'd take two steps back, and really just hinges on the O line and how terrible it's been.
Yeah, the O line was big. Not being able to protect the quarterback really sucked for them. And then obviously abandoning the run like they always do. Maybe that wasn't just a Brian Kelly thing. Maybe this team is just incapable of sticking to the run. I don't know, but that's just what it feels like to me after watching this. Joe Sloan, I'd be shocked if he stays employed after the season or gets kept on staff for any
He's
reason.
already gone, I thought.
I didn't know if they
Is
fired
he
him
not?
or not. I thought they kept Blake Baker and Joe Sloan on, but they may have fired him and Brian Kelly. It looked like the same offense to me, so I guess that's why I assumed he was still there. Nothing really changed to me visually watching this football game. So
He's fired. Yeah.
okay, well they may have literally just kept doing what they knew because they didn't want to try to practice for a new game plan going into Tuscaloosa. I guess they thought they gave him the best chance, but if I'm LSU, I'm doing anything but what they had been doing. So
Yeah, they should have taken a page from Auburn.
yeah, they ended up finishing with 232 total yards in this game. That's one of the lowest outputs they've had in a while. It was not great. They had a pretty poor performance against Ole Miss offensively, but they actually were able to score a touchdown in that game. Kicking 3 field goals in this one was just not going to get it done. I really liked what I saw from Alabama's wide receivers and tight ends. Josh Cuevas is starting to come on. He's had a couple big catches. Latsier Brooks, I didn't even know he was on the team until this year. I don't follow Alabama football that close to know what depth they have at receiver. All I really knew is that they had Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard, which are two really good receivers. But Latsier Brooks was healthy in this game, and he comes back. I think he had the biggest play in this game with a 53-yard catch that set them up inside the 10 for a 17-3 lead with that touchdown before the half. That's what made it pretty evident that this game was probably not going to be reachable for LSU if they couldn't find touchdowns, and they never did after that.
I'm glad we didn't go to this one with how the offenses performed in the game.
Yeah, we heavily considered it. I guess we're just now telling y'all that we have not gone to this game. We looked at the ticket prices and the nosebleeds. It just wasn't worth it. We kind of had a feeling that LSU wasn't going to be as competitive as we wanted them to be in this game for it to be worth going to. And with the amount of money we would have to pay, it just wasn't worth it. We had the one game we went to with State Georgia, which also ended up not being extremely competitive down the stretch. So I'm glad we didn't double up on uncompetitive SEC games this week.
For sure.
So that pretty much does it for Alabama versus LSU. I didn't really have any other big key takeaways here. I think Alabama probably had their worst offensive performance in the past couple weeks and still was able to win by double digits. So thoroughly impressed by this team's defensive game plan and how they played down the stretch this year. Next, we've got the Georgia game that we went to at Mississippi State. Final there was 41-21. UGA comes away with a solid win in Starkville. After that first scripted drive where State walked down there and scored, I thought to myself, I was like, if State can keep this up, they'll be competitive. But I remember watching Jeff Lebby offenses against teams like this at Ole Miss. When we were at a talent deficit, we had to score on the first drive of the game. We would always win the coin toss and elect to take the ball first. We would typically score a touchdown on a very well thought out scripted drive. When I say scripted, I don't mean like NFL scripted, like it was rigged, like it was destined to go that way. I'm saying like the offensive game plan was well thought out from watching a lot of film and they knew exactly what they were going to do because they knew what Georgia was going to come out in. Usually after the first drive, teams adapt to whatever you come out in, and you can't continue to run the same plays. These defensive coordinators in college football are too good, and they will adjust. So that's typically why you see teams like State have success. That's just the Jeff Lebby way. That's how he coaches offenses. And they come out, walk down the field, and score. And I thought to myself, surely Mississippi State will be competitive in this game if they can keep doing this. But I just remember Jeff Lebby. I was like, I just don't know that they're going to be able to keep doing this against Georgia. And sure enough, that was the best drive they had the whole day.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we scored again until like late third quarter. Was it? It was 38-7 at that point. I mean, Georgia scored 38 in a row. We were just completely outmanned and out physical, and Georgia just knew exactly what they wanted to do in this game and executed it pretty much perfectly. And we've had some up and down performances, and I had a feeling going into this game that since we were coming off a win, this might be a little bit of a letdown because we had been fighting to get a win in the SEC for so long, finally get one, and then play somebody like Georgia. So I'm not super shocked at the result, but it definitely sucked. And we also had probably the best tickets that we've ever gotten at a state game before, and just had a great seats for this beatdown. Like, and this sucked.
Yeah, we got front row seats for this absolute splattering, unfortunately. I thought it would be more competitive on the front of State being able to score more points. Just I've watched Georgia's defense a lot this year after watching the Ole Miss game. Like until they really tighten up and it's time to be clutch, their defense is so easy to score on. And I just thought the State was going to be able to take the top off a little bit more. Blake Shapen got pretty much killed in this game. He ended up exiting in like I think it was the late second or early third quarter with a shoulder injury. He got hit and fumbled the ball out of bounds on I think it was like a corner blitz or something, a blind side. He got smoked, and that was pretty much the summation of their offensive outing after that first drive. Was just they couldn't protect Shapen. They couldn't be consistent running the ball. It just never really came together for them after that until Taylor started to get in garbage time and show that the run game and the escapability that he brings to the table really helps this offensive line play better. They still didn't play an incredible game offensively when he was in there, but They were able to hit some shots. I think they hit one or two deep throws, one of them to Brent Thompson, who's an absolute stud, underrated wide receiver. And they had a couple big run plays with him. He punched in 3 rushing touchdowns in this game, scoring every single touchdown for State. I think that moving towards the Egg Bowl, State has to really consider, even if Shapen ends up being healthy, that Kamario Taylor needs to be the starter.
And we have to get the offensive line healthy.
Yeah,
That
Albert
is a
Reese has been
must.
out, which is you mentioned several times has been really tough on the State offensive line. I bet he'll be back in time for the Egg Bowl. If not against Missouri, y'all will really need him. But I think it really came down to the run game that Georgia had and the offensive line play. Like the drastic difference in talent there, to me, is what blew this game
It
open.
it just really showed.
Yeah, like once Georgia got stopped a couple times and it was still like a 1 or 2 possession game. Felt like State, as long as they could find at least a field goal or a touchdown before Georgia scored again, it would continue to be competitive. Georgia just leaned on y'all with the run. Nate Frazier has an incredible game. He went for, I think I have it right in front of me. He went for 181 yards and a touchdown on only 12 carries, averaging over 15 yards a carry on his own. He played an incredible game. He had a 59-yard touchdown that pretty much put this game out of reach, and or at least it felt like it did. It wasn't technically out of reach, but I think everybody in the stadium knew that when that touchdown run got broken off, that Georgia was just going to continue to do what
Is
they
that
do.
the one to make it 31-7?
I believe so.
Yeah,
That was
that
pretty
was the
much where it was
knockout
at.
punch.
Yeah, and I really was impressed with what Georgia was able to do in the air in this game. Noah Thomas had a really nice touchdown. I mean, they've been able to kind of pick apart State with those tight ends over the seam and down the sideline. They had a couple catches. There was one we talked about right before they went up 10-7. I think it was when it was 7-3. They threw a sideline pass into the left corner by the end zone to number 10, the new tight end that I actually don't know. He had a little bit of a push off, and it didn't get called. Obviously, this didn't change the game, but if State gets a stop there, they still have the lead, whether they miss or make the field goal. So that kind of mattered a little bit at the moment, but at the end of the day, Georgia was probably going to end up winning this game because they were the more talented team. I think you've got to look at like talent wise what Georgia has on offense. Their offensive line's been average this year, but they're still better than State across the board. They're better in the trenches against State's defensive line with what they have on O line. And the tight end position is just so deep. They have like 2 or 3 tight ends that could start just about anywhere in the country. They all have great size, speed, and great hands. You just can't really do anything about that. Like when we played them, it felt like Oscar Delp and forgetting the other guy's name. I think he got injured in this game.
Luke
Lawson
Lucky or
Lucky.
Lawson Lucky.
Yeah, I mean, they were always getting open, and the wheel routes. They love the wheel routes and the seams, which is really more of a pro style approach when you run those two tight end looks, and you have those kinds of schematical advantages against linebackers and coverage. That's typically what you see from really, really well coached teams. We talked about this earlier when we were preparing for the podcast that despite the fact that Georgia may not be the best talent wise this year compared to their previous teams, they still have great talent, but their coaching staff is incredible. You've got to give credit to the coaching staff. Kirby Smart always hires good coaches. They always end up being head coaches in other places. So, testament to the team and what they're able to do, despite the fact this probably isn't even one of their best teams this decade. So, I think they're probably going to wrap up this season with only one loss and make the SEC championship game if A&M or Alabama screws up. I liked what I saw. State needs a win to make a bowl game. They've got Missouri and Ole Miss on deck. I think they win one of those games. I really do. I feel probably a little bit better about Missouri given their quarterback situation, but the Egg Bowl is always just you never know what's going to happen. So we'll be probably end up going to that game, and we'll probably have a lot of good conversation about that one moving forward. But unfortunately, Mississippi State doesn't end up being super competitive in this one, like a lot of people thought. Georgia runs all over State for over 300 yards of total rushing
Mm.
offense, and I mean, I think that's about all you can really say about this game. That sums it up.
At least the alumni baseball game the night before was pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought that was neat. I didn't even know they did those. Apparently, Texas does that too, but State had an alumni baseball game, and it was really fun to watch. Ended up going into
Sold out the whole
extras.
stadium for it.
That's pretty cool. I don't think Ole Miss does one of those, but if they don't, they definitely should. That's really good for the baseball program. So I'm not a huge baseball fan, but I think that's pretty cool. Next game we got BYU at Texas Tech. Unfortunately, I bet on this game, and I bet on BYU. They've been proving me wrong all season. I was just tired of being on the losing side, and I said, you know what? I'm going to give the Cougs a chance and I'm going to put some money on this game. And I'm going to pick them outright on the podcast as my dog. Well, I guess we didn't do call the dogs, but if we did, they would have been my dog of the week. They were minus 10 or plus 10 and a half in this game. They come out super flat offensively in this one. They virtually did nothing the whole game. Um, the player of the game, in my opinion, was Texas Tech's field goal kicker. Stone Harrington went 5 for 5 on field goals, nailing a couple really long ones. 2 for 2 on extra points, and absolutely carried them to a victory here because the offense low-key kind of struggled against BYU's defense, which I figured they probably would struggle. It would just kind of be more on the terms of them maybe turning the ball over a couple times and getting a couple big sacks, putting them behind the chains. That's not what happened. They actually protected the quarterback relatively decent in this game. I mean, I think they might have had like 3 sacks on Baron Morton, which isn't great, but it wasn't horrible. They were able to string together a couple decent offensive drives that resulted in like 2 touchdowns, lots of field goals. BYU ended up turning over the ball 3 times in this game, getting 0 turnovers in return, finishing -3 in the turnover battle. That sums up the game to me. I think you look at this matchup before they played and you think, okay, I bet the winning team probably wins in the turnover margin for sure and is able to get pressure on the quarterback. BYU lost the turnover margin. They did get a little pressure on the quarterback, but it wasn't enough to really change this game. I thought that Caleb Douglas's touchdown early in the game, like after how BYU had been playing offensively, was kind of like, okay, BYU's got to score touchdowns. If they cannot score touchdowns in this first half, they are going to get way too far behind. And it's just, they're not going to have a chance. And that's exactly what happened. Texas Tech kept driving down the field, chewing clock and kicking field goals. Got up to 26-0 at one point.
The turnover stats were very surprising because coming into this game, Texas Tech was one of the teams that turned the ball over the most in the nation, actually. And BYU had one of the best turnover margins in the country, so that was a big surprise. And I feel like Texas Tech really proved in this game why their transfer class was like number two,
I
wasn't
think they
it?
might have
Number
been
or
number
number
two or number
one.
one. LSU might have had more, actually. I think they had more players. Texas Tech had more high profile guys, though.
But they played like the team you would expect with that kind of a transfer class in this game. I mean, they just absolutely shut down BYU's offense, and with how bad their defense was last year, just crazy they were able to transform it like this.
Yeah, I think that that absolutely had the biggest advantage in this game was Texas Tech and their defensive line, their linebacking core. They just bottled up Bear Bachmeier and company in this game, which I thought that Bear Bachmeier was probably going to play well. I've watched how Sam Levitt played against this team, and I thought to myself, well, Bear Bachmeier hasn't played a bad game really all season. I fully anticipate him to have a pretty good game if they win. And he didn't play terrible, but there just was not much open down the field. They really didn't have much time to throw. The run game never got going at all, which is a problem. LJ Martin got bottled up, and I think Texas Tech ended up being able to run the ball pretty well in this one. Cameron Dickey had like 140 total yards. He's been a solid player that came on early in the season, which I don't think anybody really saw him being the player he's been up to this point. This game did surprise me. I genuinely thought if Texas Tech won this game, it would be really close. BYU has been competitive in every single game, and they've obviously won all of them up to this point. But sometimes they start a little slow. It takes them a minute. I kept telling Landon, I'm like, they're gonna get going. Just give them a quarter, they'll get going, and it just never happened. So I'm not gonna bet on BYU again this season. Thankfully, I think I'm starting to see a trend where we get to these points with teams where we're really down on them. They prove us wrong for a little while, and it finally gets to the point where it's like, okay, we probably should start betting on this team. They're proving us wrong a lot. Or I don't want to be on the losing side of this because I want to pick them to lose. Everything in me was saying, yeah, Texas Tech probably should take care of business and win at home here. But I was thinking of every scenario possible for BYU to take this win to convince myself that it was going to happen. I thought the points were too much here, which they ended up not being the case. And this is probably the third or fourth time this season I've rode with a team solely because I've been picking against them.
It's 2 weeks in a row of Big 12 games that hosted game day with big spreads, and both of them ended up being covered.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. And I think we talked about this before. Just Vegas typically, when they have spreads like this, that it almost doesn't make that much sense. There's a reason why it's the way that it is.
Vegas is smart.
Vegas, okay, I saw Lane Kiffin say something about this the other day. They were talking about, I guess it was a certain matchup, and Lane referenced how Vegas clearly, it was about the playoffs, I think, and how they rank teams. He's like, if you really want to know, you need to just ask Vegas because they're, I'd say, 8 or 9 out of 10 times going to be really close on stuff. especially outright wins and who's going to cover. So I probably should have been able to look at that and be like, okay, there's probably a reason for this. And a lot of times, dogs that are that big in games, like you're probably looking at like a 10% chance they even win outright. So I'm kind of surprised I ended up going with BYU, but I doubt I'll continue to go with them down the stretch. They do have an interesting game. I think they're playing TCU at night this week. There's a chance for upset potential there, but once again, I don't even want to pick a BYU game after this. This was so disappointing. But Texas Tech takes care of business here. Baron Morton has a pretty average performance, which I was hoping to see a little bit more from him this week if they were going to prove to be a solid playoff contender. I think they're probably going to be in. I think they'll win the Big 12 and make it in. I just don't think they got the offensive firepower to beat any of these really good teams.
Yeah, I'm not sure that they do either. But as for BYU, they're gonna have a really big game with Cincinnati coming up. Both those teams are 5-1. Them two and Texas Tech are the only teams in the Big 12 with one conference loss or less. So the winner of that game probably is going to rematch Texas Tech.
I think that's going to be really close. I'm looking forward to that. I'd like to see Texas Tech and Cincinnati play in the championship game. I'm sure Texas Tech will probably win, but it'd be really funny if Cincinnati ended up taking them down and going to the playoffs. Really crazy. But this game was not very great. I really did not enjoy watching what I was able to watch of this game. Texas Tech just really kind of chewed the clock and kicked field goals all game. So that's about all we got for this one. The last game that we're going to recap is Auburn at Vanderbilt. We actually did not preview this game last week on the podcast, but with how it played out, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about it on the podcast. Vanderbilt wins in Nashville in overtime, 45-38, on top of one of the best offensive games we've seen all season from both teams. I loved what I saw from Diego Pavia in this game. He threw for over, I think it was close to 370 total yards, and then he had another 115 on the ground. So he finished with about 485 total yards and 4 touchdowns. What a game. I mean,
Both quarterbacks combined nearly totaled 1,000 yards in this game.
Ashton Daniels was right behind Diego Pavia with a really solid dual threat performance. He had over 400 total yards and several touchdowns. If they'd won the game, he would have been probably one of the key players in their win for sure. Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton both went for over 100 yards. Finally getting the ball. They both had over 10 receptions. It was time for them to get the ball. And DJ Durkin said, all right, we're going to do what we haven't done all season. We're actually going to continue to throw the ball to our playmakers with a quarterback that's competent. And that's what they did. They exposed the faulty Vanderbilt secondary in this game, and it was a really fun game to watch. I'm glad we got to watch this one pretty much all the way through, mostly in the second half. The touchdown in overtime to Junior Sherrill is what locked this up for Vanderbilt. Diego Pavia has come up clutch in so many different areas of where this football team needed to pull away and win games. And this one was probably the most clutch moment he's had all season. He had a chance to put it away and give him a chance to knock in a field goal before the end of the game and not go into overtime. They actually got stuffed on a 4th-and-1 run play. I think he got tripped up on a quarterback sweep, but he ends up making up for that with a huge touchdown throw to Junior Sherrill. I mean, I can't say enough about Vanderbilt's offense. I've been so impressed. I mean, I genuinely did not think they'd be able to get this much better in a year. They were really solid last year, but this year they've been one of the best offenses in the country, running and passing the ball. Diego Pavia is quietly putting up one of the best statistical seasons we've seen from a Vanderbilt quarterback ever. And if this team wins out, he absolutely should be considered as an option for the Heisman. If not, at least to make it to New York. I've been so impressed with him. He's playing some great football. I definitely challenge some people to go look at the statistics right now of the leading quarterbacks in the Heisman race. Throw in guys like Trinidad Chambliss and Diego Pavia, who have been everything for their team, and see where they rank statistically against the Ty Simpsons, the Fernando Mendozas, and the Julian Sayans of the world right now. Overall, Vanderbilt was clearly the more talented football team here, but Auburn came to play. I was impressed with what I saw from them. I didn't think we'd see an offensive outing from them at all in this game, and they played really well.
Yeah, I was just very impressed with Auburn's offense, but I cannot believe how bad their defense was dominating this game. The defense has been the only reason that this team has any wins this year, and they were just completely absent yesterday. But I mean, they had the offense. I don't know how it flipped like that, just out of nowhere.
I think that DJ Durkin decided this was a perfect showcase opportunity for him. He's a defensive minded coach. He's the DC for Auburn, or was until he got promoted to intern. I think he saw this opportunity and said, all right, Auburn fans haven't seen offense all season. I know I've got the players. We can come up with a game plan to get them the ball. And that's what they did. Regardless of the fact that defense was not really their strong suit in this game, I think a lot of Auburn fans probably feel even better than they did before Hugh Freeze was losing games this season and they looked half decent. I think there was some optimism around Auburn after the Baylor game, but I'd probably be more optimistic after seeing what they did in this game offensively. I mean, Jackson Arnold in there winning his Baylor only threw for like 100 yards. They just had their first quarterback performance that was legitimately good in years.
When that Baylor game is more about just how stupid Baylor's defense was in that
That
game.
was horrible. And we've seen down the stretch that Baylor's not a great football team like we thought they would be. So I think you got to look at this as in a good light as an Auburn fan. I know you didn't win the game. You probably really could have had a chance. I'm just glad that they ended up trying to get the ball in their playmakers' hands when it mattered. Like in overtime, I know Cam Coleman was in double coverage on the fade on fourth down, but they still tried to get it to him. Hugh Freeze would have run some dumb crap shovel pass or something, and it would have gotten boxed. I'm telling you right now, Hugh Freeze would have done some BS and it would have gotten boxed. So I was impressed. DJ Durkin was able to come up with an offensive performance that was one of the best Auburn's had in as long as I can remember. So, really impressive stuff. Both teams played great. I think one of the biggest advantages Vanderbilt had in this game was one, Diego Pavia, and two, penalty yardage disparity. Auburn had 12 penalties for 91 yards in this game. Vanderbilt only had three for 21. The mistakes were minimal. Turnovers were far and few between. I think Vanderbilt had one fumble. Auburn had no turnovers. The penalties, I think, is what really separated this game at the end, going into overtime. Those couple of big penalties that Auburn had probably could have changed this game.
We've
So,
seen some of these teams without their head coach commit a bunch of penalties in games.
yeah, that's typically how things go. If there's anything that I've learned from this season is that never count out SEC refs to exploit teams that are undisciplined with a ton of penalties. They're not scared to throw the flags. They are trained to throw that flag as much as possible. I feel like the Arkansas State game from the previous week that we talked about, which we'll probably bring up again at the end of the season when we start talking about SEC officiating. We've seen too many times this year where these officials just take advantage of teams that are undisciplined and take every opportunity to throw flags. So that's enough about my rant for officiating. But Vanderbilt gets a huge win to stay with two losses and be in the playoff conversation, setting up for a huge game in Knoxville against Tennessee.
They're going to take care of Kentucky first.
Yeah, Kentucky's playing good football right now.
Yeah.
They just waxed Florida 38-7. We were going to talk about this game a little bit, but to be honest with you, I think Florida's just had so many players basically opt out and get injured that this team never had a chance. Kentucky's playing better football right now with Cutter Boley as the starter. It was not going to be a fair fight. In Kroger Field at Kentucky at night, Florida's just got nothing left in the tank. If they make this game competitive next week against Ole Miss, I'd be very surprised. So that about does it for our Auburn Vanderbilt recap. All right, we're going to have a new 1 week segment. We're going to call this the ACC Fallout segment. We're going to start with Wake Forest against Virginia. Thankfully, I bet on these two games that we're going to talk about in favor of the winning teams this week. I felt like something weird was going to happen. Wake defeats Virginia 16-9, and then California defeats Louisville 29-26 in overtime. With where the ACC currently is at, it's a complete toss up on what's going to happen. These teams have weird endings to their schedules and are all kind of jumbled together in just one big melting pot of most of these teams are not elite and are probably going to have a chance to make the playoffs anyway.
I mean, pretty much every ACC team has been super mediocre at the time in the season, and especially these teams. Louisville was 7-1 somehow. Virginia 8-1, but like they've played nobody. They were so due for slip ups, and both of them have one in the same weekend.
Yeah, and Georgia Tech absolutely should have lost to Wake Forest, which would put Wake Forest as a two-loss team, and they would have multiple ranked upsets.
Also, you could have thrown Duke UConn in here as well, even though that wasn't a conference game. But that's still a terrible
Yeah,
loss.
we're about to talk about Duke, but I hadn't even mentioned the UConn game yet. Duke lost 37-34 at UConn, by the way, this past week. SMU is right in the mix at 7-3 with only one conference loss. They lost to BYU, not BYU. They lost to Baylor in overtime, and they also lost to TCU at TCU. SMU legitimately could make the playoffs as a three-loss conference champion if they win out. Duke could win out, which would be very tough to do, and be a four-loss conference champion. Then you've also got Virginia with two losses, and then you've got Louisville with two losses, with virtually no good wins. UVA's only good win coming against Louisville. Louisville's only good win is at Miami, and Miami's really not even that great. They're extremely overrated. This is a complete fallout for this conference. Worst case scenario, you've got Georgia Tech currently with one loss. Probably should be two. They still got to play Georgia. They legitimately should probably finish the season with three losses and still probably be the best position to win the conference. It's been a complete crap show. I genuinely don't know what's going to happen here, but I just wanted to bring to light where this conference is at. And moving forward, I think there's a real chance that this conference gets realigned.
This conference is on a downward slope right now, and there's a legitimate chance. It might not be a great chance, but it exists that no ACC teams make the playoff this year.
It's realistically possible. If Duke were to win out and be four losses as a conference champion, I'm not putting them in the playoffs.
No, I mean a 12-1 JMU, if that happens, gets in over them, and then 11-2 USF maybe gets over them.
Absolutely. 11-2 Tulane team. Whoever wins the American is
Tulane
probably
has
going
a
to make it.
head-to-head over Duke.
That's what I'm saying. So they lose to UConn and Tulane. They absolutely don't deserve to make the playoffs. Not a chance. If anything, you should put UConn in the playoffs. I mean, like, it makes no sense for that team to make it. I don't think that those teams will win out.
I don't think we're gonna have to
SMU
worry
has a
about
better
them winning
chance.
the ACC, but I mean maybe. Like you really don't know right now.
Yeah, I think the ACC has pretty much made it or very clear to the playoff committee that only one of them will make the playoffs. If that, there's a real chance that none of them make the playoffs. So I don't like what I'm seeing from the ACC. I think realignment's a real possibility. If I'm a team like SMU, I want to go to the Big 12.
Clemson, FSU need to get out, even though they've been mid this year. Just the overall weakness of the ACC has hampered them down, and I'm sure they really want to get out right now.
Yeah, if I'm Florida State and Clemson, I'm thinking, please do not sign a contract to stay in this conference. Like, if I'm a head coach coaching either of those teams, I don't want to be there anymore. So hopefully those teams will figure something out. The ACC feels like the next Pac-12. So we'll see what happens here. I think we'll be having a really interesting conversation in the next couple of weeks with how some of these matchups are going to play out. You also have Pitt, who's about to play Notre Dame in a non-con game. They'll probably lose that game and have three losses. They'll be one conference loss with two non-con losses. They're in the mix. It's insane. These teams have been terrible out of conference and cannibalizing each other in conference. There's just no telling what's going to happen. I don't feel good about any of these teams even winning if they make it to the playoffs or being competitive
Yeah, I don't
nonetheless.
feel good about them not getting blown out. Like whoever makes it out of the ACC is gonna get waxed.
Georgia Tech and Miami are still the better teams in my opinion. Maybe SMU, maybe Pitt, and in all reality, none of those teams are relatively complete even on one side of the ball. So I see a real scenario where even if they get a team in, they get absolutely blown out in the first round. So not looking good for the ACC right now. Really unfortunate circumstances, but we love chaos in college football. That's what makes it so interesting. So definitely going to be tuning in for what our matchup's going to look like in December for the ACC championship game. We have another new segment. This one's going to stick around. We're calling this segment the Optical Assault Game of the Week segment. This is a game that we're going to choose every week that is virtually unviewable. And some of them, we may not have a week where there's a game that's this unviewable. We do this week. But we'll pick the worst game, in our opinion, from a watchability standpoint with the outcome. As of right now, our leader for this week was the Wisconsin Washington game. Outright winner for our segment. There was really not much of a debate on the unwatchability of this football game. I'm going to pull up the drive chart real quick. We've got to read through the drive chart. So I'm not going to read out the two touchdowns because it kind of dampens how poorly this game was played by both teams. The two touchdowns scored by each team having one because it was a 13-10 final, were less than 10-yard touchdowns. I'm not just talking about the play, I'm talking about the whole drive. Both were turnovers that resulted in possession for the recovering team inside the 10-yard line. Washington recovered a blocked punt inside the 2-yard line, punched it in two plays, and then Wisconsin had a fumble inside the 10, and in a couple of plays punched in an 8-yard touchdown drive. So I've got the drive chart in front of me right now. The first drive from Washington resulted in a turnover on downs, then followed by a missed field goal, punt, turnover on downs, punt, field goal, field goal. We're locked in at 3-3 in the second quarter. Punt, touchdown from 1 yard out for Washington. Punt, interception, punt, punt, end of half. That's just the first half. Third quarter, punt, fumble, touchdown, 7 yard touchdown drive off of a fumble by Washington. Punt, field goal, missed field goal, punt, 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 downs, end of game. I don't know that I have ever seen a less viewable football game than this one. The weather was not great, granted. Wisconsin is one of the worst football teams in the Big Ten, if not the country, getting blown out by Iowa at home. That's pretty bad. Washington supposedly was a good offensive football team, but they've had some weird outings against Ohio State and against Michigan where they did not play well. But I think we chalk that up to Michigan and Ohio State have good defenses. I guess Washington's just not great against good defenses. Well, Wisconsin's a pretty average defense. On a good day at home, they're solid, but this team's terrible. They only completed like 3 passes and won this game.
Their leading passer was the punter, right?
Yep, freshman punter was the leading passer in this game. Wisconsin had like 4 or 5 different guys throw in this game, and they only had like 40 passing yards. This was one of the worst football games I have viewed in my entire life. It was terrible. So I'm glad we started the segment with this game. We may not be able to beat this one genuinely. We would have to have another 3-2 game to beat this one legitimately, or maybe like a 7-3 game, like the Arkansas State game a couple years back. This was awful. We're gonna continue to do this segment because I think it's actually kind of fun. Unfortunately for the teams that we're showcasing, a lot of these teams are gonna be teams like Iowa and Minnesota and Northwestern and Wisconsin. I'm talking about the Big Ten. So every now and then we'll have a team that's not featured in the Big Ten in this segment, and we'll have to give them a special shout
Don't
out. But
sleep on the Mac for this segment.
every now and then you'll have a Tuesday night action game that is just so unviewable, it's not even funny. I genuinely think a lot of these will be Big Ten games, but we'll see. Currently not sponsored by LASIK Plus, we have the optical assault game of the week. Wisconsin at home against Washington, 13-10. All right, it's time for our Week 12 top 25. We're going to do like we did last week in light of the playoff rankings being released. We're going to start with Ohio State at number 1 in my poll. Nothing has changed there. They have been my number 1 team, I think, since week 1 after they beat Texas. Still got Indiana at 2. A lot of people have moved them down. I don't believe in that. They won on the road in one of the most clutch manners I've seen all season with a 3rd and long from the goal line touchdown throw to Omar Cooper. Fernando Mendoza gets absolutely smoked and lays it on a dime in the back of the end zone for an incredible toe tap catch. Extremely impressive win. Penn State came out with the best they've had in weeks. Nick Singleton puts up 3 touchdowns in a strong effort from the Nittany Lions to continue to stay relevant. They dropped this game, unfortunately, but Indiana just showing what kind of guts they have as a football team. They didn't win this game 55-10, so people are getting upset. You can't win every game by 45 points and run for 350 yards. You just can't. Penn State was the preseason favorite to win the national championship for like a lot of people. That's insane that you can look at this game and you can move Indiana down because you think they didn't play the way you wanted them to play. I know some people are moving up A&M because they think they're a better team. You could make an argument that that makes sense, but if you're moving down Indiana just because of the way they played in this game, rubs. I've got Texas A&M at number 3. I thought they played great, and if the teams in front of them lost or really did play poorly, I probably would move them up. But I'm still confident in Ohio State and Indiana right now. They're playing great football. A&M right behind them. I honestly have all these teams very close. The spread for these games would not be too much for me between these 3. Got Alabama at 4, tailing right behind A&M. Solid win against LSU to improve to 9-1. This team has been on a tear since losing to Florida State. Not even close to the same football team that played in Tallahassee in week 1. Not even close. Got Georgia at number 5 off of a very impressive win that we got to go see in Starkville against Mississippi State, winning 41-21. This team's legit. They may not have the best defense they've had in the past couple of seasons, but I love Georgia. Their offense is playing really, really well right now. I've got Ole Miss at number 6, winning 49-0 against the Citadel. Not really much to talk about there. Trinidad, stat padded for his Heisman performance this season. He's going to need a lot of help. Number 7, I have Texas Tech on top of a big blowout win against BYU, winning 26, 29-7, the late field goal to beat an undefeated BYU team. Texas Tech, my odds-on favorite to win the Big 12 easily. Looking to probably play BYU again, if not Utah or Cincinnati in the Big 12 championship game to make the playoffs. In number 8, I've got Oregon. Very close, come from behind, last second victory in Iowa at probably one of the toughest environments to play at with the weather that they played in. I was impressed. Not a lot of people were impressed by this game. If anything, people were moving Oregon down. It is so hard to win in Kinnick Stadium in those conditions. It is so hard. And I'm giving Oregon all the credit for being able to go down and win this football game. Dante Moore didn't even have his best game. He played pretty poorly, but with the conditions and the defense from Iowa, you're not supposed to expect a statistical masterclass. So Oregon comes away with a very close win, 18-16 against Iowa. I've got Notre Dame at number 9, blowing out Navy at home. Solid win for Notre Dame. I expected that one to probably end up the way that it is. Notre Dame has been beating these service academies very handily, despite their good seasons they've had lately. I think the talent disparity is always evident in these games, and Notre Dame exposes a poor Navy defense. At number 10, I have Georgia Tech. Despite the fact that I don't think that this team is a top 12 team legitimately, I'm kind of forecasting here. I don't love this, but I think Georgia Tech wins the conference and they drop the game to Georgia. They still make the playoffs. I think they easily are going to be the ACC's playoff team. If carnage continues to ensue, they may not have a team make it, like we talked about earlier. But if I had to pick right now, I think they make it in. Georgia probably will get that game in Atlanta. If they win that game, it's still very much a possibility that Haynes King could go in there and win that game. I think they move up, but I see a realistic scenario where they drop that game, probably in a relatively competitive rivalry, win the ACC championship game against a Virginia or against a Pittsburgh or a Louisville. Any of those teams, I think they probably would beat. Got them at 10. Texas at 11. They're continuing to win football games. I think they've got a really big game this week against Georgia that I don't have them winning. They'll probably move down with a loss there, and they've got to play A&M to finish the season. This team, in my opinion, would have to split those games and play really good in both of them to make it. I don't see that being the case, but it's likely. My cutoff is right at 12. Vanderbilt would be my number 12 team missing the playoffs. My highest ranked group of 5 team currently is USF at number 24. They just entered my rankings. I have James Madison at 25. So those are my 2 highest ranked teams, but USF would make it as the 12 seed and match up against Georgia in Athens for the first round game. That's my top 12. That's where my playoff rankings would sit right now if the season ended today. It's an interesting playoff field for sure. The group of five is super murky right now. The ACC is super murky. I think the Big 12 is starting to shape out, and chaos could ensue there too. There's always a chance that Texas Tech could drop a game, and we're looking at a 2-loss Big 12 team somehow making it into the playoffs, even though they probably have no business being there. So that's my top 12 right now.
So my top four consist of Ohio State at number 1, and then Indiana at 2, A&M at 3, and Bama at 4. And then my 5 through 12 is Georgia at number 5, Ole Miss 6, Texas Tech at 7, Oregon at 8, Notre Dame at 9, and then Texas at 10, rounding out the top 10 teams that will make it. Because in my poll, I do not have an ACC team in the top 12 or G5 team, obviously, but I have Georgia Tech taking the 11 seed from number 16, and then James Madison taking the 12 seed coming from number 24.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting playoff field. I think that the top 8 teams have been solidified, if not the top 9. I really like where Notre Dame's at. They're probably going to finish out the season undefeated and make the playoffs, sitting pretty there, probably around the 8 or 9 seed, depending on who else loses. I like those 9 teams. I think they're clearly in the field. I think it gets murky when you start getting to Oklahoma, Vanderbilt, Texas, Georgia Tech, and the group of 5 teams. There's just no telling what's going to happen. The ACC is a mess. The group of 5 is probably going to continue to cannibalize itself. Um, I really feel like USF is the most talented team. Byron Brown's the best quarterback in the AAC. I really would like to see him make it. Drew Mestemaker is probably the next best quarterback in the AAC. As far as a passing quarterback, he's the most talented, but Byron Brown's the best athlete. Those 2 teams, in my opinion, if and if the playoff field was getting announced today, since USF has the head-to-head, I'd put them in over the one-loss North Texas team. But James Madison's been playing really good. Alonzo Bennett has been confirmed the starter for a couple of weeks now. And he's playing good football, but they do not have a good strength of schedule. They have not played anybody. I have a hard time putting them into the playoffs if they finish 12-1 unless carnage ensues in the group of five. That's going to do it for our playoff segment and top 25, which will be posted on our Instagram at Feel for the Game College Football. Appreciate a follow there. We also will have these broken into segments on our YouTube channel, which we haven't really talked about how we do this. If you listen on just Spotify, we do have a YouTube channel, which we break down all of this podcast into different segments. So if you don't have time to listen to all of this and you want to get some different games and our input on those, we break them down. You can go listen to those individually there. We would appreciate a follow on our Instagram and a follow and subscription on our YouTube channel as well. You can view all of our posted content on Instagram visually since we do not have video on the podcast on Spotify. All right, it's time for our Week 12 preview segment. Our first game that we're going to be previewing is Notre Dame at Pitt. I think this game could be interesting. I'm definitely leaning heavier on Notre Dame here. I just think that the talent advantage is so significant. I like Pittsburgh and what they're doing at quarterback. They've switched up that position since an injury early in the season. I think even though their quarterback was healthy, they got hurt. I think they kept him out. I'm really impressed with what they're getting from their new quarterback. They've played really solid down the stretch. They're currently 7-2. A win here would be huge for their playoff chances if they want to do anything. Even if they win their conference, they probably need to win this game to be realistically in the playoff field. My reasons for probably taking Notre Dame here, I really do feel like their offense is so much more balanced. They run the ball at will against most teams, and they throw the ball really well when they open up the run game. So I fully anticipate them with their two back system with Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love to open up the run game, and then the passing game will probably start to take its toll on Pitt's defense, who has been spotty all season. I don't think they'll be able to stop Notre Dame. Having home field advantage is great and all, but the talent advantage is just so much more leaning in Notre Dame's favor. Notre Dame's run game has been good all season. Not many people have stopped them on the ground. Jeremiah Love is still one of the best players in college football, with Jadarian Price being one of the most unsung running backs right behind him. That lightning and thunder is just it's such a good combination for them. I feel like Pitt in their passing game, if they really want to win this game, is going to be the biggest factor for them. Averaging over 300 pass yards per game, I think that's their biggest strength. Their passing offense is great. If Desmond Reed, the running back who actually is currently not their leading rusher, but one of their leading receivers, if he's healthy, I think that gives them a massive advantage. Schematically, they can do so much with him. He's kind of a Darren Sproles kind of player. For those of you that remember Darren Sproles, he's smaller, he's quick, he's elusive, he's got great top end speed. He's a really good route runner. Out of the backfield, he doesn't pose the hugest threat, but if he's healthy and he can go, he's probably going to be an impact player for them. Pittsburgh has to get the passing game going if they want to have a chance. Those are my keys to victory for them, but I like Notre Dame winning this game 37-23.
Pitt's been on a heater ever since. Was it the West Virginia game? Was their last loss? I
Yeah, they
think.
blew the game to West Virginia. Quarterback gets hurt, and then they make the change and play against Boston College. I think they won 48-7 in that game,
Yeah,
and they started rolling.
and it hasn't been against great teams, but they've blown them out. Unlike a lot of the other teams at the top of the ACC, so there's something to be said about that. But as for Notre Dame, as you kind of said, just the talent disparity is pretty big there, especially in the trenches too. And Pitt's defense, even though they've been winning, hasn't been great against the teams they've played that do have dynamic offenses. They've given up like 30 points each of those times. So I don't think Notre Dame's going to have much pushback on that side of the ball. And Notre Dame has been improving on defense pretty much every week. So I think they're going to do enough on defense to hold off Pittsburgh. I like Notre Dame here, 38-24, to go on the road, get a solid win here.
Yeah, Notre Dame cannot afford to slip up. They're like I said, Pittsburgh really does need this win too if they want to make the playoffs, but they actually still have a route to make it if they were to lose in a close game. If Notre Dame loses, they're done. They will not make the playoffs with
Yeah.
three losses. So Notre Dame needs this win a little bit more. I think they're a more consistent football team and they're more balanced. Their secondary is susceptible. So going back to the passing game with Pitt, they're going to need to get that going. Their one common opponent that really stood out to me was Boston College. They Pittsburgh blew them out 48-7, and Notre Dame just had a tough game against them. It was like 25-10. They needed a walk-off
Yeah,
touchdown to
really
seal it.
weird one.
So, you can't really judge teams off of that. I just know a lot of people like to look at common opponents. That is an interesting one to look at, but I definitely feel like regardless of that outcome, Notre Dame is still the better team. The next game we're going to preview is Alabama versus Oklahoma. This game to me profiles as probably the most interesting game of the week. I like both of these teams and what they bring to the table schematically, but they're very similar teams. Alabama has a great quarterback in Ty Simpson. Really solid, really consistent. But John Mateer, when he plays good football, can be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Right now, he's struggling. Statistically, he's not been the greatest, but athletically, he's still one of the most gifted players in the entire country. If he comes and plays a great game home against Alabama, sorry, I think this is actually at Alabama. If he can go into Tuscaloosa and bring his A game, Bama's historically struggled against dual threat quarterbacks. When they lose games, 9 out of 10 times, it's to a dual threat quarterback system. So I think that's a huge key for Oklahoma, but I like Alabama in their profile. Their defense is really solid and their offense is really solid. Oklahoma has been spotty on both sides of the ball. Their defensive line is absolutely the best unit on the team. They get pressure on the quarterback in almost every matchup, but it really just depends on what your quarterback can do. And I think Ty Simpson just finds throws on the field that no one else is going to find. Their receiving core has been really solid. Jeremy Bernard, Latsier Brooks, and Ryan Williams. With the coming on of Josh Cuevas at tight end, it's just going to be too much for Oklahoma's secondary. Um, I think the biggest thing for me for both of these teams is their inability to run the football. Oklahoma has actually shown a little bit more life there, but each team respectively is averaging less than 4 yards a carry, with Alabama at 3.6 and Oklahoma at 3.9. Oklahoma a little bit more turnover prone. So these statistics may even out, and it may end up being a really close game. I have the final being 27-24 in favor of Alabama. I do see a little bit lower scoring, close game here. I just like Alabama to probably control this game from the get go, even though it's close.
Alabama's undefeated in home games with DeBoer. I don't see that changing here. And I just don't think Oklahoma's offense has enough to keep up. I know they found some answers last week against Tennessee, but a lot of that was supplied by Tennessee mistakes. I don't see Bama giving them those mistakes this week at home. I think Alabama wins this game. I think it'll be close because that's how most Alabama games are, but I see them finding a way in this one, 24-20.
Yeah, I think we have a pretty similar feel for this game. I do like John Mateer when he's healthy. He may not be fully healthy for this game, and that plays a huge factor on this for me. Oklahoma's defense is going to have to come to play. If they can get pressure on Ty Simpson, they could make this game really ugly. It could be really low scoring because I think Alabama's going to probably have a good game plan for Oklahoma. I like what I've been seeing from Isaiah Centegno at wide receiver, but he's about the only real consistency they've got at that position. Deion Burks has been a non-factor late in the season, so I don't know what we're going to see from them. If they can find points, they may even win this game outright, but I like Alabama too. Next, we've got Iowa at USC. I have the final of this game being 23-13, but to me, this feels a lot like the Michigan game for USC this year. Michigan comes into USC and gets beat like 31-13. USC had a great offensive performance against a really solid defense who'd been playing well down the stretch, and they dominated that game. USC typically doesn't do that, but they've played really well at home. Quarterback play has been a huge advantage for them. They clearly have one of the best offenses in the country when playing at home, averaging almost 50 points a game. On the road, they've struggled a little bit, but I think this team is well equipped to take care of business at home against an Iowa team that genuinely hasn't had a real road test yet. They played a lot of their games in Kinnick Stadium and played them really close, but still haven't really gotten that signature win this year. They lost at Iowa State early this season in a really sluggish game that we've talked about. I just don't think they will be able to chase USC with points in this game. I don't really see a scenario for Iowa to win unless Jaden Mayava gets hurt. The quarterback advantage is just way too big.
I don't like Iowa in this game. Coming off an emotional loss to Oregon, huge opportunity they had, coming up short by 2 points, and now going on the road. As you said, no big road test for Iowa this year, so this is unfamiliar territory for them. USC needs this win to stay in playoff contention and to get them to 8-2, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't see them slipping up here. Their offense has been too consistent, even against the Iowa defense. It's pretty good. I still like them to win, 24-17.
Yeah, and we've got to remember characters of teams. USC, they're not a clutch football team. They've looked decent this season. They look like a little bit different than what I'm used to seeing from USC, but this is a Lincoln Riley coach football team. It is November. Anything could happen here. I expect them to win this game at home, but they've got a big game coming up against Oregon. I don't know how that's going to go. I think one more loss officially knocks them out of the playoff race. If they are able to win out, they'll probably steal Oregon's spot in the playoffs where they're ranked right now. I don't see them winning that game. I think they go ahead and get this one though, 23-13. Hopefully they can get the run game going and the defense can continue to play the way they've been playing. Next game we're going to preview is Texas at Georgia. Final in this game, I'm picking to be 31-23 in favor of Georgia. I feel like Georgia's offense against Texas's offense just profiles so much better. We talked a lot about what Arch Manning has been able to do recently in this offense. I think it's a little deceptive. I'll let you talk a little bit more about that because you have some good insight on it. But I think that Gunnar Stockton's playing great football. Nate Frazier's coming along. He's playing really well. Chauncey Bowens is playing some good football. I genuinely like Georgia's offense over Texas in almost every single facet. Texas is averaging less than 4 yards per carry. Georgia has been running the ball very well as of the past couple of weeks, running for over 300 last week against Mississippi State, running for over 250 against Ole Miss. I'm really liking what I'm seeing from them. Passing offense has been there. The tight ends are finding a lot of separation in their passing game, which is giving the receivers a lot more one-on-one coverage. Zachariah Branch and Noah Thomas are playing great football as well. I just think Georgia's got too much. They dominated Texas the past couple of years. I don't think Sark's going to be able to pull this off in Georgia. Prime time slot. I think that Gunnar Stockton plays a really solid game and Arch Manning struggles in this one.
I like Georgia's game as well. I see Texas' little dink and dunk short passing game hitting a brick wall here against Georgia. And I know Georgia's defense hasn't been the best this year, but I think they're going to have a good game plan to shut this down. If anybody can do it, I think they can. But I also see Texas defense just getting walked over by Georgia. I mean, the consistency of Georgia's offense is just incredible, and Texas defense has been susceptible at times this year. So I see Georgia getting a relatively easy win here, 35-20 at home against Texas.
Yeah, I see it being competitive for the most part early. I think Georgia's going to control this game. I have it as an 8 point final spread, but I definitely see a scenario where Georgia gets into the double digits, putting Texas in a really bad position in this game. Just because Texas's defense has been so spotty. Vanderbilt was able to climb back into that game last week and put on an offensive clinic against them in the third and fourth quarters. And then Mississippi State had for 3.5 quarters one of the best offensive performances anybody's had against Texas in the past couple of years. I just don't see how Georgia watches that film and Kirby Smart and company aren't able to expose Texas at home. So definitely feel good about Georgia in this game. They get past this one. Final test is Georgia Tech and Atlanta. I think they probably run the table if they win this one. All right, the next couple of games we've got, we're going to go ahead and lump these all together. These are a little bit lower profile games, but we still think have some pretty solid impact on the landscape of college football in November. We've got NC State at Miami. I think that Miami's going to pull out a close win here. I've got them winning 34-31. Feels really yucky for Miami. I feel like there's a real chance for a slip up here, but they're starting to stat pad against these lower teams in the ACC right now, trying to build a case that they legitimately should still have a chance in the playoff field. I don't think a two-loss Miami team's going to make it, no matter how they finish. They would need a complete collapse from everybody around them in the ACC to make it. NC State has a lot of upset potential. They beat Georgia Tech just a couple weeks ago. They beat Virginia earlier in the season, which was somehow a non-conference game, which is ridiculous. But NC State's got a good offense. It is in Miami. I'm going to take Miami with the defense they've got to have a couple key plays. They're going to give up some points in this game. I think they're probably going to have a couple key plays with the pass rush that affects CJ Bailey. Both of these quarterbacks have been throwing interceptions like just every single game. A couple games where they had multiple interceptions. Carson Beck had a 4 interception game against Louisville. I see a scenario where one of the quarterbacks, if not both, turn the ball over several times in this game.
I think we get the good version of Miami in this game. That could be a contender, but unfortunately, that Miami doesn't show up too often. I think it does now since they're out of contention for the ACC. Like, of course, they're going to show up and play good now. I like them to actually dominate this game, 42-24. I know NC State's had some good performances, but they're not that great. They've taken down two Giants this year. Well, Giants, I'm calling Virginia a Giant. That was one of their wins. I don't
Yeah,
think that.
they've got two upset wins.
Well, a Giant in the ACC because they're still 8-2, but two big upset wins for them. I don't see that happening here. Miami's going to come out play well since their playing for nothing, of course, the crystal ball way. It's a 42-24 Miami.
Yeah, I think those are two really very viable scenarios. And I don't feel great about Miami playing close here, but it just feels like a weird letdown spot again. Like last year, Miami just the way they finished, like losing to Georgia Tech and to Syracuse, it was just such a weird spot. You're like, their team looks so good, and now they're just like shell of themselves offensively and defensively. So I have no confidence in Carson Beck. You have brought me onto the caboose of the hate train for
Welcome to the
Carson
party.
Beck. I am pulling the horn. I'm right there. I have no confidence. So I refuse to pick Miami to confidently win any game down the stretch the rest of the season. We'll take them outright though against NC State at home. Next game we got Virginia at Duke. I think this one's going to be really close. I'm going to take Duke 35 to 34 solely because I'm uncertain of the status of Chandler Morris for this game, even though he hasn't been playing great down the stretch right now. I think that Duke has the better quarterback and the better receivers. Cooper Barkate, the wide receiver for Duke, is top 10 in the country in receiving yards. Gary Mensa is number one in the country in total yards per game for quarterbacks. He's playing incredible. And if his team was a little bit better around him, he could be a real serious threat to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country right now. Talent wise, I think he might be. I was kind of on the little, no, maybe not a hater train for him early in the season, but I was down on him. The 4 million just didn't make sense for me. Duke paying him that much money to come there, but he's done about as good as he can do with what he's got around him. I've been impressed. He's made some NFL level throws, and he's still only just a sophomore. So very impressed with what I've seen from him. I think Duke has the offensive advantage here. The matchup is going to me play into a shootout most likely with how bad Duke's defense is.
I actually like Virginia in this game, and that's pretty much purely just because I've learned that Duke is to never be trusted to do anything really. But this does hinge on the availability for me of Chandler Morris. If Chandler Morris doesn't play, I do think Duke wins this game. But if he does, I'm sticking with Virginia here.
Yeah, I think that matters. The backup quarterback played well late in the game against Wake Forest, but not well enough to get them a win. They lose that game. So both these teams coming off of really disappointing losses. Somebody is going to be fired up in this game. I just think Duke's got too much firepower to not be the team that comes out blazing in this game. I know they lost at UConn. That's a really tough loss. But UConn almost beat Syracuse earlier this season when they were actually a solid team with Steve Angeli. So not a horrible, horrible loss, but not a good feeling for Duke. Wake Forest beating Virginia, only needing 16 points, feels gross. I don't like that. I'm not confident in Virginia right now. They don't look near the team that they looked like early in the season. And I think that Duke probably escapes with a close win here. Regardless, wouldn't surprise me what kind of carnage happens in the ACC moving forward. The next game we're going to cover real quick is South Florida at Navy. The only reason I think we're really covering this game is because of the slate and what it brings to the table this week is not really big. And this technically has title implications for the
Navy is
AAC.
still first in the ACC somehow.
Yeah,
Uh,
they're number one in the AAC in the standings, but I think that changes after this week. Is at Navy, but South Florida is clearly the more talented football team. They have Byron Brown. That really is all I need to say. He's averaging like over 80 rush yards a game and over 200 passing yards. He's playing out of his mind. He's carrying this South Florida football team right now, and I'm more than impressed with how he's been playing. I think that they're averaging over 6 yards per carry as a team going against another team that averages the most yards per carry in college football with 6.5, and that's Navy because they're a triple option football team. USF has one of the better run defenses in the AAC. I think they're able to shut down Navy, kind of a similar fashion to how North Texas played them, be dominant on the ground in the way that Navy wants to win the football game. And I think they close out a blowout victory here.
I like South Florida as well. They're just way too much for Navy. I know Navy got to like 7-0, but it was really with a bunch of very easy wins in there. USF just way too much talent. Navy's defense has been really trash in these last few games. I like South Florida to go on the road and win 45-21.
Landon, I think your dog's having a fun time over there on the couch. That's what that noise is for those of you who are hearing all the distorted noise in the
Yeah, my,
background.
my dog was sitting on top of the couch and then just slipped off the couch somehow and fell down. She's fine, but now she's just like rooting in the couch. I don't know
Surprised that
what's
dog's
going on.
okay. 11-year-old dog falling off of a couch with
Yeah.
her feet
No,
up. That's what that thud was. Anyway,
trying to
sorry for the distracting
get her under
noise.
control.
So the last game we're going to cover real quick before we get to the only game that we're going to be going to this week is Cincinnati versus Arizona. This has Big 12 title implications, believe it or not. If Cincinnati drops this game, they're probably out of the race. Arizona, I think, has 3 conference losses right now, so I don't think they have a realistic shot, but they're 6-3, so this game does matter to them. They could probably make a good bowl game if they win out from here on out. They've still got to play Cincy and Arizona State, so I don't see that happening, but they're in a good spot. A lot better than a lot of people thought they would be this season. Noah Fafita quietly having over 2,000 passing yards and 21 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. Brennan Sorsby's right there with an incredible stat line, not off the top of my head that I've got, but he's over 2,000, over 20 total touchdowns. He's ran for over 400 yards. He's been really solid. It's a quarterback battle. I think that Arizona probably has the more experienced quarterback. I like Noah Fafita, but the more talent on Cincinnati's side offensively is what kind of makes me want to lean that way. I really like Brendan Sorsby. Evan Pryor's been great. Tally Walker at running back's been really solid. I mean, they've got a really good backfield, one of the best in the Big 12. I think they're going to be able to run it a lot better than Arizona is in this football game. I'm going to take Cincinnati 41-31 in a shootout. I think it's going to be one of the better games of the week offensively. I like both these quarterbacks a lot. So, really impressed with what I'm seeing from both of them. Should be a fun game. One last stat that I noticed while looking into this game was that Brendan Sorsby has only been sacked 2 times all season. This offensive line for Cincinnati should absolutely be considered as one of the best in the country. They're protecting a really good quarterback right now who's playing out of his mind. And Arizona has allowed 17 sacks on Noah Fafita. He's a slightly less mobile quarterback, so he's less likely to escape pressure like Sorsby is, which is probably why those stats are shifted the way that they are. Arizona's offensive line is not terrible, but I foresee a scenario where they definitely allow a lot more pressure on Noah Fafita than Cincinnati allows on Brendan Sorsby. So I like Cincinnati here. Really interesting quarterback battle. I'll be tuning in for this one. Classic Big 12 game.
Cincinnati's got to have this game to stay on top of the race here in the Big 12. I think they get it. I know Arizona's 6-3, but I don't really think that they're as good as their record. I don't think that's going to really matter on the scoreboard in the end, though. I think this is a game where Cincinnati gets up by double digits early and is able to hold on. That's been the theme in a lot of their games. The main one that comes to mind was the Iowa State game. They went up like 31-7, I think, and only ended up winning by 8. I see that kind of happening here. Maybe they get up like 28-7 or something like that. But I have them eventually winning this one 31-24.
Yeah, I think this one will be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to watching that one. I always like watching Brendan Sorsby. He's super underrated. Noah Fafita has been one of my favorite quarterbacks in college football since he had that 10-3 season his freshman year. He's super talented, and that team around them just hasn't been the best, unfortunately. So glad they're having a little bit better of a season this year with him. All right, we're gonna preview real quick the game that or I say we're gonna be attending. I'm gonna be attending this game by myself this week. Landon is going to a basketball game in Starkville, so I'm going to be going to this game. Ole Miss takes on Florida in a must-win in Oxford to most likely lock up a playoff spot at home, being a host. So I like Ole Miss to win this game. Unfortunately for Florida, their season has only gotten worse. Lots of opt outs, if you want to call it that. Lots of players getting ready for the transfer portal after the coach was fired, Billy Napier, just a couple weeks ago. Several injuries to wide receivers. It's just not really been the best season for Florida, and it's just kept getting worse. I still like this to be a really strange game. I think it'll be slightly close. I bet Ole Miss pulls away, ends up being the more dominant team. If Trinidad Chambliss stays healthy, this team will have a chance in every single football game they play. I will say, if he does get hurt and Austin Simmons plays in a game this year, just go ahead and chalk it up. Ole Miss is a completely different football team with him at quarterback. I'm really worried for Ole Miss. If they end up seeing Trinidad Chambliss get injured, we're looking at a completely different scenario for Ole Miss. So I really hope he's able to stay healthy. He's been really, really awesome for Ole Miss. I think he's a sleeper for the Heisman, or at least to make it to New York. Him and Diego Pavia are being massively slept on. They are the most valuable players to their football team in college football to me right now, maybe other than Jeremiah Smith. They've been so solid. Statistically, they may not be putting on Heisman caliber seasons of old like we've seen with guys like Johnny Manziel or Ashton Genty last year. Even though he didn't win it, he would have won by a million votes this year. They've been great. I like Florida with what they have in the run game, but other than that, I don't think this passing game is really solid. DJ Lagway got benched this past week against Kentucky. They lost 38-7 in Kroger Field. I think the depth is just a huge issue for them. They're not going to be able to compete with the kind of depth issue that they have right now. But it's an SEC game at night. Ole Miss gets an advantage at home here. I like Ole Miss to roll to a 10-point victory, 27-17.
Florida was already a mid team, and somehow they've become a shell of that mid team. I mean, getting beat 37 or 38 to 7 to Kentucky is just absolutely inexcusable. I don't think this team has a chance against Ole Miss. This feels like a team that's kind of folding at a very bad time. I think they're 3-6 now, right?
Yeah, they're 3-6, so they need this. They need to win out against Florida State and Ole Miss if they want to have a chance to make a bowl game.
Yeah, that's just not going to happen. I think Ole Miss takes care of business here against an extremely depleted Florida team, 41-14 actually.
Yeah, I was very tempted to pick Florida to get beaten in massive blowout here, but as an Ole Miss fan, I know one thing, and that is letdowns. Massive letdowns. Last year, Florida was like 4-5 when we played them. Everybody thought they were dead in the water. It was in the swamp. It was an 11 a.m. kick, yes, but we got beat. And it was
Well, that was
pretty
a team that
obvious
was
that,
trending up, though. This team is trending very down.
yeah, but I mean, up until they beat LSU, they had been trending down. So you never know when it's going to start. We could be the start. They could beat us and beat Florida.
I just think getting beat by Kentucky like that just ends
Yeah,
everything.
I said Florida. I meant Florida State. You're right. Losing 38-7 against Cutter Boley in Kentucky at Kentucky is just awful. It is inexcusable. And I think that this team has lost the last bit of fight that they had left, but I'm just not willing to be as confident as most people about Ole Miss right now. I love our team. I'm excited for what we've got ahead of us possibly in the postseason, but until we win this game, there are no locks with Ole
Does it just
Miss.
seem too good to be true?
It
Too perfect
does.
to be true? I
It
understand
does.
that,
I did
but
not foresee us being at this point in the season where we were really talking about Ole Miss being a lock. I figured that every game was going to have a chance for us to drop something. I still think that. I still think the Egg Bowl, Ole Miss has a really real chance of losing that game. It's the Egg Bowl. State's still a good football team. We absolutely could drop that game. And if Ole Miss wins here and we lose by 2 touchdowns in the Egg Bowl, we might not make the playoffs. You just don't know what the committee's going to do. They may look at these losses a lot differently than other people would, but Ole Miss has to emphatically put this team out of their misery in this game. Final nail in the coffin. Florida needs to be eliminated from being competitive down the stretch.
maybe y'all can finally shut up their fan base about getting Kiffin because that's all they talk about.
I think if Ole Miss dominates Florida at home, the Florida fan base will just quiet down for a little bit because I think we all know Lane Kiffin's not going to go to Florida. If he's leaving, he's going to go to LSU. And I don't even see that happening. So I feel pretty good about Lane Kiffin staying. But if we lose or we are able to miss the playoffs somehow, I could see him be like, you know what? This isn't sustainable. I can't win here big. I can't make the postseason here. Maybe he does leave. But he's been so good here for the past couple seasons. I just have a hard time being confident about this game and the Egg Bowl. Even if we dominate this game, I'm still not going to feel great about the Egg Bowl. But Ole Miss and probably one of the fewer really bright spots that we've ever had as a program to be contending in the postseason. So I'm excited, looking forward to go to my final game of the season in Oxford. Should be a great environment. I hope our fans really show out for this. We've been getting a lot of hate for not showing up to games when our team is good. So hopefully we'll show out for this game and it'll be a fun one for the Rebels.